to see were patterns evolving. And that's when I really started to understand we had to address this as an organization. So the next slide, oops, I skipped one. The maturity level model. This is what I came up with. It's nothing innovative, nothing rocket science. It's just tailored pretty much to Agile and giving us obstacles to go through, but also for government. So one of the things I learned and I figured out was that when we get industry training for Agile, we learn Agile in its inherent term. We learn how to do Scrum, we learn how to do Kanban, and it's a process that's been defined. But what we don't learn when we go into that is how to crosswalk what we have in Waterfall into Agile. So I found it incredibly challenging trying to use Waterfall tools the way we took Waterfall requirements and then shift those into Agile. In our sustainment programs. It was very difficult. So what I tried to do was come up with a maturity level model that let me see where they were at and if they had done these cornerstones that would get them to a DevSecOps. So this model that you see on the screen has infancy, crawl, walk, run, and fly. Fly is when the team is at full automation. They have that Agile process built in. It's very inherent and the team is very mature at this point. And then they have the automated feedback loop from that field user. Now, one of the key points I want to make here is we were combining or using the term Agile and DevSecOps interchangeably. But on our maturity model, what it shows you is crawl and walk is instilling the Agile development process. That's that iterative development, start again, another cycle, I finish, I have a definition of done, I'm done with that, I set it aside, and then I start another one, or I release whatever that program needs to do. Run and fly is the DevSecOps piece. It's the automation that you're building in. You're automating that to go with agility. So the first two, crawl and walk, is just getting the training. It's getting the process defined. It's starting to look at your Agile tool set. It's talking with your team about transitioning from waterfall tools into Agile tools. How do we do that today? That is a big step. So crawl and walk is taking quite a bit of time for our teams. Run and fly is putting in the automation behind that. So you're starting to use the pipeline in run, and then in fly, you've got that mature team, that process, it puts out the MVP, and then they use the automated feedback from that field user to refine it and make it a more mature product as they go along. So that's what we want to get everybody to. That's our ideal state, but we are not there. So this is the BES Maturity Dashboard. What this dashboard is it is all the programs that we have so far assessed. 88 is where I'm at right now. 23 of those programs have not done anything to go to Agile yet because of various reasons. Some might be they don't have the right contracts, they might not have the skill sets, they may be going being subsumed, so there's no reason for them to do much, or they just haven't had the opportunity. 41 of our programs are in crawl. Notice that number, that is almost half of what we have. We have 15 in walk. Walk, just to remind you, is a maturity level where they have a process defined, they have an Agile strategy, they have an Agile tool set that they are using, they have brought every stakeholder that touches the product before it goes out the door, brought them to the left in the process for planning, and then they've also started looking at metrics. So that's what walk consists of. Those are the objectives we want them to meet to be in walk. Run, we have 9. Those 9 are all BES PIN programs, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute. And notice we have 0 in fly. On our dashboard, you can click on these by division, and it will tell you what each program is in. So that's for our senior leadership to access. We keep the assessments for historical purposes and historical data. Behind the assessment, this is a really brief overview of it, but it's simply, I have 36 questions I came up with. Those questions align to the 12 principles of Agile. They generate a spider diagram. I created a small, simple algorithm that apply weights. It generates the spider diagram that lets the teams know, and the teams fill out those assessments, where they need to work. These two spider diagrams show a nice round circle, and they show that they are at, one of them shows a 4, one of them shows a 2. Notice both of those. Now, when they generate those, I have done an assessment with the team as well, asked them some follow-up questions on that questionnaire. And if my assessment aligns nicely with their spider diagram, that means we're on the same page. If I see a large delta between my assessment and how they answered it, I go back over their assessment with them and ask them if they're sure. Sometimes the nomenclature or the vernacular is misunderstood, and so we have to help them walk through that. They've learned to map the term that is used in waterfall to an agile term, and they're not really doing that, but we have to talk to them and change their assessment answers. So BES is adopting Agile. It's slow, and we need to know why. And some of what I observed will tell us why we did that. It is happening, though. I want to make sure everybody understands we are adopting Agile, and the attitude, the mindset is being overcome. So as I mentioned, that Agile mindset, that's the thought process. That's the ability to not need everything at one time. That's the ability to know you still have to have some documentation and to know just what that sweet spot is for Agile, but you don't have to have all that documentation. You don't have to have that full design up front. We don't have to do big design reviews, but we still have to do a design review. So when I was talking with the engineers, I was explaining to them, your design review, that PDR, happens at sprint planning. That's where I get to sit and look through all the items that they've selected for sprint or release, whatever. If it's Kanban, they're going into the iteration. And I look at those and I make sure that they've addressed all the information in there. They understand what they're going to do when they start the work. There's no confusion. Everybody's on the same page. IA has looked at it. They've checked the controls that issue is going to need to be tested against. All the test scripts have been identified. We understand how we're going to test it. And we also know that we can get that work done in the time allotted, or what our plan is to be able to complete that, and I can release it at the end. Now, sometimes you have to do several items to be able to make up a release. And in Kanban, you can wait, and you know when you have to, when all the work is done and at the ready state or final state, then it can go into release. However your team does that, we just want them to know what that point is. Most of our teams are using Scrum, and so when they go into a sprint, I challenge those engineers, make sure everybody has a definition of ready. Make sure all of your items have the task in it that the developer is going to do. What are they going to touch? Because that information is now your design documentation. So it's that agile mindset we want them to get to. So with that comes training, right? So we knew we needed training. We started hiring industry partners who already understood Agile. We started setting up training. DAU has adopted Agile training. We've gotten our industry partners at Gartner and Cutter involved. We've hired a training contractor, and we started setting up training. Now, that's going well. However, remember I said inherent training to Agile is only teaching you the process, but it doesn't tell you how to map it from waterfall into Agile. That's the big challenge. Tooling, there's another one. We have programs going off and just getting tools for Agile. What I know to be true is that anything that is different than an Agile tool set makes it very hard to do Agile. So our leadership at first didn't think that that was necessary to have these Agile tools. They don't like to prescribe tools. They want to stay tool agnostic, understandable. However, what happened was we found that the Agile tools are what enables agility. It creates the automation, the transparency. It helps us align to those 12 principles, right? Helps us make them small, and we can all get in there and be collaborative. They have chat tools that are that interface with them or are part of the tool suites. So this is why those Agile tools were so important. We did not have those. So our organization took on the task of standing up a Agile tool suite. We are now in the process of standing up the Atlassian tool suite. It only has Jira, Bitbucket, and Confluence at this point in time, but we also have GitLab in our pipeline. BESPen is using GitLab, which is an entire pipeline. So those are the things that we knew we had to overcome, and the programs that don't have the tooling right now are having that difficulty. Technical debt. Technical debt is a big one. These programs that have old monolithic applications, or some of these mainframe applications, some of the applications that have deprecated software or hardware, agility is going to be difficult. Trying to go quickly with a lot of technical debt is you're going to operate at risk. We have to get our industry partners helping us burn down this technical debt. We have to get our product owners on board with being okay with getting technical debt refactored and resolved. This has to start to be a priority, and our engineers have to step up and start advocating for this technical debt. One of the things we're going to need from our industry partners is them to give us the industry best practices to overcome some of our old technical debt. Product owner involvement is critical. That is one area we don't have a lot of power over. I have recommended to our PEO that we start letting our customers, I apologize, our customers, our product owners understand that when you come to work with BES, the requirement is your product owner has to have the involvement at the level that's required for Agile. We need that product owner involvement and that quick feedback, and we need them to be a knowledgeable product owner. We all know how that works. Sometimes we get people put in these spots that have no idea about what the field user needs. So we've got to have access to that field user, and we also have to have a product owner, an empowered product owner at that. We have resource constraints. Resource constraints was a broad bucket for me. That was one where we don't have tool management, test management tools, or the programs have no test management tools today, or they don't really have any test sets. Believe it or not, we have quite a few of those. Or they don't have the right people. They don't have funding. So there's all kinds of things that fall into resource constraints. And the final one was contracts. Many of our contracts are written in Agile with waterfall procedurals. We have to get to SUS. That is what we are asking our contractor community to do for us, and then also our industry partners to help with. We need to get to SUS, Agile SUS, so we've spent a lot of time trying to educate our FM and our contract community on that. Working with Ms. Cruz, she's really trying to help our team to do that, and we're getting there. Not there yet, but we're getting there. So one of my big findings in this was Greenfield versus legacy. I've alluded to it a little bit through this discussion, talking to you about those legacy sustainment systems, and then Greenfield is that brand new development. Let me tell you how this happened. I asked if I could assess BESPen. I didn't know anything about BESPen. I went into it not having any real knowledge about it, just had heard the name, didn't have time to learn about what BESPen's work was, so that was good. I was able to go in and just ask questions through a naive state because I had no idea. And it really was interesting to find out as I worked with these very cool teams, innovative, excited, just the whole energy within each area was so different than what I was experiencing within BES. But what I found was they had no waterfall process to rework. They started with Agile. That's what their contract was written for. They didn't have to take any of that technical debt and overcome it. There was nothing to refactor. They started from scratch. They had no Agile mindset to overcome. That entire BESPen was set up around Agile. It was meant for Agile. They had no contract changes they had to do. They had no acquisition activities to resolve because the PMO office was still handling that, and they had dedicated teams. I thought, wow, this is so cool. Why is it so different? Why is the attitude so different? They were new, fresh blood, fresh to this organization, and they didn't have all those other challenges beating them down. But what was interesting is not one program was at fly. because many of the programs, or all of them actually, didn't have product owner engagement or active one, or they weren't allowed to talk to an end user, and they didn't have metrics tooling in their GitLab pipeline. So they were still challenged with metrics. And metrics are part of a key portion of Agile, one of the principles. It's trying to do that continuous process improvement. Well, you need metrics to be able to see what you're trying to improve and if it worked. Well, they didn't have metrics as part of their GitLab pipeline, so now they're trying to get that. They do have some metrics ability in there, but they had stood up their tool set wrong in some cases and weren't using it correctly, which then made it difficult to get the right metrics. So now they're trying to work that. But I found that so interesting that they won't get to fly without those things. So we know those are true obstacles. So I've already mentioned, I think, about Agile and DevSecOps equal fly. But one of the things we were doing was interchanging Agile and DevSecOps. So when I was able to break those two terms apart with our senior leadership and let our product managers and our product line managers and our product owners start to understand there's a difference, they started to get it, and they started to understand why those objectives for crawl and walk were so important, because to get to run and fly, you need to have those cornerstones in place. Now, industry says the three biggest obstacles to DevSecOps are mindset, which we've already talked about, the architectural constraints, which is part of that technical debt, and then tooling. What we know to be true is monolithic applications that are very tightly coupled is probably the best word, makes it difficult for them to go agile. To move quickly, it's difficult to test. We've got to start addressing our architectural patterns, and we've got to start looking at that technical debt. So that all falls in there. And then the tooling, making sure we have the right tools, the scanning tools, the test tools. So those automated test frameworks are very important. And then the dashboards, the feedback mechanisms. We have to have all of those things in order to make BES a success to go to fly, which is what our nirvana state is. So a little bit about these obstacles. I've kind of gone into that technical debt, old code that can't be automated. We've got several applications that have code that can't be automated because it's old. I'm trying to think of like Tickle TK. We can't scan Tickle TK. We can't, and that's in the DCAPES program, I believe. Of course, that monolithic architecture. But another big thing of technical debt is security. We have so many programs that who have POAM'd security findings, and nobody's holding them accountable to resolve those security findings. So what I found to be true is the AODR, once you've got a POAM, they will give you the authority to go ahead and release. But it's up to the programs to resolve those things. They put them on a POAM, but they're not adding them to their backlog. They're not resolving those security findings. So I started polling security assessment reports. We're carrying security debt 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years and not resolving those things. So we've got to address those findings and start making security a metric that we're tracking. Obviously, the product owner involvement I've talked to, they're infrequent, they're not trained, they're not involved, they're proxy, but they're not empowered to make decisions. And then we have those non-knowledgeable product owners. We've got to make sure they're trained. The contracts, we've got waterfall contracts. I found programs that are transitioning to agile contracts. Now, this is an interesting one I want to point out. Programs that are in sustainment, getting ready to put a new contract in place and want to put agile on contract. How do you do that without any agile tooling? You have no process in place, and you want to bring a new contractor in, and you want to give them agile deliverables, but you can't. So how do we do that? One of the things I talk to the programs is about doing a crosswalk. Initially, these seed rules are due. until you get to an MVP, and then you start, those seed rules are relieved. We no longer ask for those once we get to this MVP. Now we want metrics. We want to see customer satisfaction. We want to see delivery with agility using industry best practices. So that's what we're going to have to try and do, is do that crosswalk. But it is not easy. We have a lot of agile contracts, agile language, waterfall seed rules. That just means that you've used the words agile, but you're really asking them to still do. They've got CDRs, PDRs, FDDs, all of those things. So we've got to go back and mod those contracts and look at that. We've got to reduce the paper deliverables that are being asked, because it makes no sense. If the tools are set up correctly, we can get rid of those. Development environments are separate from the government testing, making it very difficult. There's a handoff. Without that automation built in, there's sometimes a week to install something. That is not agile. So we've got to overcome those. We need to get developers working in a government-owned development facility. And then the developers working in an agile tool within their own enclave. So many of our contractors or our programs are using, for instance, this is just an example, but the 581st over at Warner Robins. Well, they've got a firewall where none of our outside government people can access their tool suite. So they're keeping everything in their Team Foundation server or Azure DevOps, and nobody can access it and see it. So the transparency is not there. They're having to build spreadsheets, send them to the government. Then there's a handoff. There's some install, setup where they can test, and it just does not enable agility. So that all plays into that tooling. If we don't have the tooling or limited access, we have DI2E. I don't know how many of you are familiar with DI2E, but it is owned by the Intel community. They have had leadership change and said we can't support anybody unless they're belong to Intel. So they were going to kick everybody out. We negotiated. They're going to let existing programs stay there, but nobody new can come in. So we knew we had to stand up our own tool suite. And then there's that cost, the expense of it. There is an expense behind it, and we've got to handle that and get funding. Training, we have various training. We've had training for 2 years, but they haven't implemented it, so we need to get refresher training. Some teams have no training. We've done a good job of getting training. We've got Pluralsight. We've got Udemy. DAU has set up training. We're allowing contractors to go in. We're setting up workshops, and when we call them workshops, contractors can attend. So those are the types of things we're trying to overcome by putting those risk mitigators in place. And then, of course, the resource constraints I talked to: hardware, funding, agile cornerstone enablers, which are like unit test framework, test management tools, personnel, and skill sets. Quite honestly, we have many of our personnel who just can't shift their mindset. A lot of them, it's just been ingrained in them. They've done it 20, 30 years, and they just can't shift their mindset. So that is going to be something we have to overcome. So this is where it gets kind of nerdy here, and I won't go into too much detail. But essentially what I did is I took a feature set of all of these findings, and I put them together. And what I realized, to try and understand how complex this was going to be for these programs, I had to find that feature set and find out what the most important features were, where our number one feature is that we had to overcome in order to be able to achieve agility within BES. So I created a decision tree, and what it told me was technical debt was the number one feature that will prevent us from going to fly state, as I've talked to. And this decision tree just tells me how that technical debt's a critical feature, and that it's basically, it's based on a set of features from those agile assessments, but essentially any program with technical debt coupled with any one of those other obstacles becomes highly complex. So understanding the complexity, programs with high complexity are at a high risk for failure for shifting to DevSecOps and Agile without given time, removing those obstacles, and strategic planning. So what I understand and what I explained to our senior leadership was these programs that are classified as high complexity, they're very difficult. They need strategic planning. They need leadership engagement. We have to assign experienced resources there. We can't be putting lieutenants in charge of these programs that are highly complex. We need dedicated resources, and they're at high risk for introducing chaos. One of the GAO reports out there talked about introducing chaos to our programs that is irreversible. Once we do that, sometimes it's hard to overcome. You can't take the chaos back out, and you almost destroy the program. It takes years, and it's extreme cost to the taxpayer. So we have to be aware of that and understand what we're doing. Moderate, they're difficult, but they're achievable. We want to make some adjustments. We need some strategic planning and some leader oversight. But what I found was if we removed one or two obstacles, it made it moderate. So if they were high and we could address some easy wins, then we could get there with less oversight and less resources. At that point in time, which this was given a month or two ago, I had 45 programs that were in high, 10 in moderate, and 18 low. What I want to say to that is now I've done financial systems, and I will venture to say that all of those are in high. So this number is probably around 55-ish at this point. The probability of complexity based on features, this is how I did it. I took this feature set, I created an algorithm that would classify these based on this feature set and based on the answers. So if they have an agile contract, but they have high technical debt, and if they need agile training, then they become highly complex. This slide just shows how complex. The blue circles show the programs that are very high. These are probably the most complex ones. Probably most of these are ERPs. I don't have the system names on this, but this just gives you a splatter diagram that shows you these are the low right here, and the green ones here are moderate. So we have very few that are moderate. So most of them are high. This could probably switch to more moderate, that stream of blue, with removing some easy wins like getting training and getting tooling for these programs. This view right here, programs complexity and contract type. So what we know here is how many of these, the high are in the blue, and if they have the upside down triangle, these are the ones with waterfall contracts. So what I tried to do is create an algorithm where I could take it to each functional area, contracting, and say, let's hit these first. If we can overcome these, we'll reduce these down to moderate easily by addressing their contracts. Which ones can we hit right away? The same, these are moderate level. We could get these to low by addressing their contracts. So what I was trying to do is give a way for each area. If it's tooling that makes them highly complex, then we can go on and we know exactly which programs we've got to hit, and we'll work at those. This slide just shows how I came up with probability of high complexity. I won't go into that for this conversation. This one showed resource constraints. So this was another way for us to look at technical debt coupled with resource constraints. Again, in the blue, and did they have resource constraints? If they have the upside down triangle, this just lets you know how many of these programs are resource constrained in some way. It might mean that they don't have the proper tooling right now, they don't have funding, or they don't have the manning that they need. Many of our programs have one developer, so it makes it really difficult for them to address high technical debt with one developer, or low funding. So what do we do now with this? Right now, we've got to start addressing these obstacles. So I brought this to senior leadership within BES. I went to the General Level Leadership Summit, and I briefed this, and I told them we have to engage with our customers right now and ask them to start training and engaging and committing to knowledgeable product owners. Without that product owner, as you could see with BES BESPIN, we could not get to fly. It won't happen. They can have the best teams, the tooling, no technical debt, but we won't be able to get there because we need them to commit and engage. We need that end user feedback, and we have to get their buy-in to do that. We have to have a commitment to long-term tool funding for our programs. We cannot keep asking our contractors and our programs to shift tooling. We need to have one tool set. We need to standardize that, and we've got to get the funding for it. It makes me very nervous to be moving into tools that we don't have long-term funding for. We have to remove the waterfall contracts. Talking with Ms. Cruz, she is ready, and they're going to start looking at this. These waterfall contracts and procedurals, we've got to start addressing those and figuring out how we can mod them, and we need to get our industry partners on board to work with us on modding these contracts. We need to make training required across the PEO and track it. We need to make technical debt and security findings a reportable metric. So when we go to Mars, these teams have to start reporting what their technical debt is and how they're burning it down. What are they addressing? I have heard so many program managers tell me, well, our customer doesn't care about our technical debt. Well, then that's when our leadership needs to engage, because we are responsible for these systems, keeping them secure and keeping them safe and easily adaptable, and we want them ready for change as we can. And if we haven't addressed the technical debt and done what we're supposed to do, then we can't do that. We can't meet what our requirement is. We also have to identify our resource constraints and start addressing those. These programs that don't have the proper funding or don't have the resources, we need to create an action plan to remove those constraints and get that taken care of. So how do we start to monitor our programs differently? We look at security findings. Programs should not carry security risk, not with Agile. We need to start addressing those POAM'd items, get those burned down, and then when we get into a DevSecOps pipeline, we can then keep up with that technical debt and the security debt that we've got. We can address those as we go. Technical debt, we've got to monitor. End user satisfaction needs to be a key metric. We have to pay attention to the end user. Product owners, value to the end user, not the customer, value to the end user. We have to fix our bugs versus new capability. We want to monitor how much is going into these releases. Are we fixing more bugs than we're adding new capability? I have teams telling me they're getting releases out every month, and when I go in and dig into what their releases are, 90% of their release is defects. Well, that's not getting anything to the field user. That's fixing what they broke because they're going fast and not doing it correctly. So that's what we want to start tracking. Agile implementation, we want to watch that maturity. We want to keep them accountable and keep programs moving into automation, automated testing. That unit test is key, and then the tools. So those are the things that I have brief leadership on. This is where we're at today. Feel free to ask me any questions. I hope this was helpful or informative to you all.
Thank you, Ms. Charbonneau. If those that have questions want to use the chat box, you can ask questions there, or we can take questions too if you're like to go ahead and speak up and ask. We'll give it a few minutes just for those that are typing.
I see one in the question. Can your process types of deliverables, assessment process, approved tool suites, etc., be released to SBs and other vendors so that the industry can invest internally to better help our BES as a partner? So I think the types of deliverables that we'll be looking for are still being worked in our Agile SUs. But right now, what I believe they've got some Agile SUs templates out there for BES. They're working on them right now. And I think if you contact the Agile Services team within BES, you could do that. I can get that contact information to you. I should have gotten it to you, Tia. I'm sorry. But I'll get you that information. And I believe the contracting officers within BES have that SU on it. Now, what I believe to happen is it will now be teams will be held to MVPs, customer satisfaction. There will be the agile metrics that you're being held to. So that's how they'll be doing that going forward. But I have not seen the latest SUE where they're at, so I can't tell you exactly what those are. Do I think they can be released to SBs and other vendors? Yes, I think they should. I think that's the only way we can become partners with our industry, is to say, this is what we expect and can you help us get there? Because it's going to be a team effort. We'll have to have that collaboration. Everybody's going to have the mindset, government and our industry partners. And Mr. Schaffner, you said, yes, you're right, Mr. Schaffner. What I feel like, what I have experienced and what I believe to be true is our engineers have to be able to write the story to our customers and say why technical debt is so valuable to burn down, what the return on investment is to them. We have to sell it to our customer. So we're going to need our industry partners to understand that and say, what does it give them? Sometimes I don't want to buy tires for my car. But if they tell me that I'm going to have a blowout on 65 at 11 o'clock at night, I might go ahead and get tires, right? It's not something I want to spend my $500 on, but I will. That's what we have to tell our customer. So with NextGen, when we got so far behind in our technical debt trying to meet all their needs, I told them, look, I can't give you any more capability because we're so far behind in our versions that they don't have that capability. You've got to give me the time to do it. Are you willing? They bought in because it's a pay me now, pay me later. So if they want more frequent releases and they want to be able to get it out and get it secure, and they want quality that these users can use, then we've got to address this, and we've also got to be able to be given the time to build in the automation. That's another big piece of it. Anybody else?
I think there's a question to the right. Are the BES programs all low complexity?
No. Some of them have really struggled for a hard time. But when I did the Agile assessment, okay. So yes, they're all low complexity. And the reason why is because they didn't have all of those, that they didn't have the technical debt. They didn't have that acquisition stuff. They didn't have waterfall that they were trying to transition over. You know, they really had the ideal state. They went into it with an Agile mindset, with an Agile contract. They didn't have to deal with any of the stuff the program had. Now, so there were low complexity to do Agile, and they're doing great, and they'll get to fly. But where they're challenged at is integrating with our sustainment systems. So they are, the problem is complex, but Agile complexity was low, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. How do we know
so we've been very oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. How do we know when changes are coming to our org? I'm not sure whose org this is, but I think what they mean is how do they know when the changes are going to trickle down to their organizations, since this Agile training is being given to the program offices? You know, how is it getting incorporated into each of the organizations?
So I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you're within BES, it's already here. I think I've hit every program. There's a few stragglers behind that I didn't get to assess because they were in some sort of cloud migration or some big effort was going on and they didn't have time for us. But it should be at every program at this point within BES and within the organization. If not, and if you let me know what organization, I can give you probably a better idea. But it should be there. The training is there. The Agile services team has links to training, registration, tool information, all of these things. And then they will, every CDM, every capability team manager is now required to start reporting differently to their leadership, because now leadership is having to report to Mr. Aldrich differently.
Okay, great. They did.
So hopefully it's already at your organization.
HIM and HIAM.
It is there. It's already there. So reach out to, you may want to have a conversation with your capability team manager or your product line manager, but it is in HIM. Matter of fact, that is their goal this year, is every team within HIM needs to be at walk. They're going to be tracking that agile maturity.
Okay,
so many of our division chiefs are now required to report this. This is their goals for the year.
Okay, we have another question. And Kendra, I think I may be coming in a little slow, probably on audio, but it is up in the chat section. But even with BES Agile programs, how is BES championing Agile with outside stakeholders with the waterfall requirements mindset?
Oh, it's a struggle for BESPN in some ways. So what they found was that MVP that they started with, they understood what the MVP was, meaning the contractor did, but our government partners did not, our customers didn't. So the MVP kept growing and growing and growing. And then our senior leadership was like, how far are we, how much of a percentage of our MVP have we burned down? And I happened to be on the call and I was listening and I thought, and this poor young lieutenant was saying, well, they keep adding to my MVP. I think this is the question that you're asking and this mindset. So I said, hey, Colonel, let me explain something to you. Your MVP is growing. So the burn down, it's not going anywhere. It's still staying at 10%, 20%, because every time they do something, you add 50 more things, or not him, but the customer. So once I explained that to him, he went, oh, okay, it's just going to be education. We're trying to get it there. It's things like this that will help being able to articulate it, talking with senior leadership, getting in with the customers. Mr. Aldridge has me briefing at a leadership for CE today and talking with them. So hopefully we'll start to get this out there and start changing how they think and getting that mindset shifted. And then these requirements that used to come in as waterfall requirements were more like epics. Then we start to look at the user stories and which one is the most valuable. Get it out there, refine it, and then keep developing it. So I'm trying to help all of our teams. There's one of me, so many people, but they're starting to get it. We're seeing a shift.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know we're getting close to our time today, and I don't want to keep everyone late. Ms. Charbonneau, on behalf of Montgomery Young AFCNs and Tech MGM, we thank you for joining us today and sharing with us the BES Agile landscape. I think we've all taken something back that we can use from this, maybe additional questions afterwards. I will get with you if I receive any of those and send them over your way. We really appreciate it. I would also like to say thank you to everyone who was able to attend today. We appreciate you also as well and being able to make time for the Young AFCEA Business Over Breakfast event. Please continue to look for future AFCEA events coming up near you. If you're interested in learning more about AFCEA and our local Montgomery AFCEA chapter, please visit our website to learn more about what we do and upcoming events. Thank you all again for attending, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, everyone.
Kendra?
Thank you. And you can reach me by email. Yes. Bye-bye.
Kendra, we would like to post your slides if you don't mind. If it's all right with you, would you please provide them to Ian? If you don't have his email address.
Yes, I can do that.
Oh, that'd be great. For everybody that's still on, we did record the session. It came in late. If you don't mind, we will post that link also.
No, that's fine. You're welcome to.
Great. Ian, over to you when you get that information. Thank you all.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.